let's talk about some items that you need to get now for when SHTF happens. So what are some items that you can get now that will help you in an SHTF situation? That come to mind for me are books. You need to have some books on hand. Things of how to do things, how to can, how to uh, build a root cellar, how to use, uh, how to harvest meats, how to harvest animals, how to um, do all of these things that you need to do to be able to survive. All these survivalist books, living off grid, they're all wonderful. I actually did a video on one of these things of all the books that I had at the time. I've gotten many more since then, but yeah, you can go back and check on that one. Have a lot of books, and those will come in handy in an SHTF situation. Another thing that you might want to consider having on hand is sugar. Sugar is really good because it's not just something that you add for sweetener. It's not just for desserts or things like that. You can use sugar for when you make apple cider vinegar. You can use sugar for many other things. I just finished making some apple cider vinegar, and I had to put that in there. When you're canning, sometimes jams and jellies and things like that will require some sugar. So that's really important to have. And salt is as well. Salt is good for, you've got to have that for canning. And salt is, you've got to have that to survive. Your body cannot live without salt. Now, speaking of salt, fat is another thing that your body cannot go without. You hear a lot about low-fat diets and low-fat this and low-fat that, but really in a survival situation, you need to have fat. If anybody has ever watched the TV show called Alone, they are looking for sources of fat because fat is going to help them to sustain themselves over the long term. And so fat is really, really needed. Now, there are many places, many ways that you can get fat on a homestead. You can get that through animals. When you harvest an animal, you can take that fat. Lard comes from pigs, and tallow comes from cattle. And you've got goats, and you've got, ducks are really high in fat, and you've got a lot of ways of getting fat. Now, things like chickens and rabbits are very lean. You're not going to get much fat from them. That's why it's important to have good sources of fat on your homestead, not just chickens and not just rabbits, because those are very, very lean. That's one of the reasons why we have ducks. And of course, we can milk the goats, and that has fat in their milk. And so those are good animal sources. You can also grow fats, which is like you can press your own oil and make your own vegetable oils. Like sunflower oil, you can do pumpkin seeds, you can press all kinds of different seeds that you can grow, and you can get oil that way, although you're not going to get a lot at one time. So I would say another thing that you would really need to have in an SHTF situation is clothing and shoes. You've got to have a backup because you don't know how long SHTF is going to happen. What if it extends out to 40 or 50 years? Your clothing and your shoes are going to wear out. And unless you have fabric to mend and the skills to be able to mend clothing, then you're going to have some backup. And so if you've got a lot of clothing and shoes as backup, you're going to be okay. Bartering, that's a good thing. You've got to have some things, some items on hand that you can barter with, because there's things that you may not be thinking of, or even me not even thinking of, that you can barter for the things that you need. So some of those bartering items could be coffee. A lot of people like coffee. And so you can, we actually have a coffee tree right now. And I like coffee. I don't need to drink it, but I know in a SHTF situation that is a good bartering tool. So that is one of the reasons why we have a coffee tree. Another one is alcohol. There is a lot of reasons why someone would want alcohol. Um, Addicts, they will trade anything and everything to have their alcohol. And so that's one reason. But also, like with me doing a lot of herbal tinctures, I've got to have alcohol. And, if you've got a lot stored up and on hand, then you're going to be able to preserve a lot of the herbal things that I do. So, there's a lot of reasons for alcohol, but cigarettes is another one. A lot of people are addicted to cigarettes. So if you can offer them a cigarette, they might want to offer you a couple of chickens or some eggs. Oh, by the way, eggs has got a lot of fat in it too, um, especially duck eggs. But going back to that, you can barter your knowledge. You know, that's one thing that you may not realize that you can do is you can barter your knowledge. If you've got a good skill, a really good skill on something particular, you can barter that knowledge and hopefully get what you need in exchange. So those are really good things that you can barter. Something else that you might consider getting is ammo and guns. A lot in being able to use those guns. Now you'll need to have some kind of a pistol, and that is mostly for defensive reasons. To defend what is yours when the riots begin and things like that start. You need to be able to defend your homestead. But other reasons that you would need some sort of a gun, like a rifle or any of those that for shooting game, you would need those. But to be honest with you, a lot of people will be wanting to hunt. And so I don't think the availability of animals will be there for when if you need to hunt. But it's also good to have that on hand. But you've got to have the ammo to go with it as well. You've got to have a lot of ammo, unless you know of a way to make the ammo, and then that opens up doors for you. But you can store a lot of ammo. Go ahead and get it now. Have it on hand, especially with your handguns. Go ahead and get your magazines loaded in case you need to use it. You'll already have it on hand. You'll be ready to go. Canning supplies is another thing that I think that a lot of people are not thinking about, and I'm not talking just about jars and lids and the bands and all that. That's good. That's great to have on hand. I've got lots of them. I feel like I could always use more, but that's not what I'm just talking about with canning. I'm talking about if you use a Presto canner, you're going to have to replace those gaskets ever so often. And you're going to have to replace and check and make sure that the gauges are working correctly and all that. That's one of the reasons why I went with an all-American canner, is because you don't have to worry about all that. Yes, it's heavier. Yes, it's much more expensive. But in the long term, in the long run, it's going to save money and it's going to be safer because they won't explode like a Presto canner will. That was one of the main reasons why I went with that. But in a SHTF situation, where are you going to get those gaskets? How are you going to find someone who has those? Or, over time, they're going to they're not going to be good anymore. So, that's something that you got to take into consideration. And that's where a lot of that, like the salt, comes in handy, because that's canning salt is a part of canning too, depending on what you are canning. Let's see, tools. Tools are a big one. This is including nails and screws and a hammer and those things that I'm trying to think of the name off the top of my head. That a scythe, I think is what they call it, that you can cut grass with, because you're not going to have lawnmowers going, because after a few months, gasoline goes bad. So even if you've got a lot of gasoline stored up, it's not going to last. So you've got to have a way of cutting the grass. You've got to have a way of shoveling or raking, or, you've got to have all these tools, and you got to have those now, so that when time comes, you will have them on hand. Another thing is you've got to have a lot of wood. Now, wood meaning for burning in a wood cook stove, or wood meaning building things. With animals and with a homestead, you come across things where you need to build it. You need to have wood on hand, and if you've got that already stocked up, then you don't have to worry about it. Fencing is another one. If you've got animals, the fencing will eventually go bad. Even if it's a metal fence, the galvanized fencing, it's going to go bad eventually. So it's always good to have a lot of fencing on hand, especially if you get different types of animals. After SHTF happens, you need to have that fencing available, so that you can get the infrastructure set up, so you'll be ready for those animals. Rope. Have you thought about rope? Rope comes in handy for a lot of things. It's good to have on hand for basically any kind of project that you're doing. Candles. Candles is another one. Now, you can make candles. I have made candles out of the excess tallow that I have gotten in the past from the cattle that are butchered. And, that makes great candles. It does. But in an SHTF situation, I think I would much rather use that tallow for internal use, so that we can, like I said, we got to have fat to survive. So I'd much rather have a lot of candles stored up and stocked up, so that I can just light it and go. And so candles are a big one. And I mentioned just a moment ago, wood cook stove. That is a good thing to have on hand too, not just for cooking. Of course, you're going to have to cook. If you hunt and you bring in game and you need to cook it, you're going to need a way to cook it. But it can also come in handy for to keep you warm in a colder situation. So, if you live in a cold climate, you don't want to freeze to death. So you need to have a way of producing your own heat, and that plays back into the wood as well. You got to have trees, so that those trees can be cut down, so that you can burn that wood, or you can have wood stocked up and put away. Now, you're going to have a whole lot. If you don't have trees, you have to have a whole lot, because you can go through several cords of wood in just one winter, depending on your location. If you're more northern and you're in a really cold environment, you're going to go through more wood than you would if you were living in, let's say, Florida. So, those were just some things that you need to keep in mind. Just keep in mind these things that you don't necessarily use every day, but you might need them when SHTF happens. I hope that you have gotten something out of this. Maybe it has made you think. We here at SHTF, Survival Homestead Teaching Farm, appreciate you watching this video. Have a good day.